Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, Geraldine Hall. I'm a customer success manager at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host or co-hosts to take part in the conversations that we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is exploring the power of Data Cloud. So if you've been interested in learning more about Data Cloud, because I'm pretty sure everyone has, it's been quite the subject lately, this is the session for you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our co-hosts for tonight. So welcome Bryan Wise, Tennant, Rachel Dishman, all of whom are Salesforce certified Data Cloud consultants. Bryan is a distinguished strategic solution engineer at Salesforce. He is also a US Navy veteran and 12 times Salesforce certified. Don is a principal solution engineer at Salesforce. He is also a US Navy veteran, a lot of Navy representation in the house today, and 4-time Salesforce certified. Rachel is a lead solution engineer at Salesforce, and she is a military spouse to a US Navy veteran who, Rachel also works at Salesforce now, right? And 9 times Salesforce certified. It is so great to have you all co-hosting office hours with me today. Welcome. It would be great if each of you could take a moment to introduce yourselves further and share Salesforce stories. Bryan, would you like to go ahead and lead us off?
Sure. Nice to meet all of you and excited to be here and talk a little bit about Data Cloud today. My experience in public sector technology started when I was in the Navy. Actually, I was teaching at the Navy's Nuclear Power School, and they asked me to become their Oracle database administrator. And that involved a ton of report development. That was probably 90% of my job, was developing reports. And so I've been very heavy in the data and analytics space over my career. Super excited about Salesforce really deciding to extend its platform with a serious data platform capability, kind of sitting underneath the core Salesforce platform, and happy to share some examples later today or answer questions about that.
Awesome. Don, do you want to go next?
Sure thing. Yeah. Very happy to be here. It's interesting as I think back at on my time when I was active duty in the Navy. I tried to kind of bring to bear some of my computer science background into that role, not necessarily recognizing that at the time some of that maybe probably caused as much a struggle as it did providing solutions. I would create like one-off Microsoft Access databases to help the admin department with their fitness reports and that sort of thing. And it's like, that's all well and good while I'm there, but then I leave. And who's going to kind of go in to fill the gap for the sustainment piece, right? So a lot of times we have to kind of think about these types of things from a big picture perspective in order to really fully appreciate the impact. And I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about Data Cloud is that it, by its very nature, is a very big picture approach to solutioning the real problems and needs that a lot of organizations have around their data. And I know that we'll get into it, but it's definitely something where, as I've kind of gotten more familiar with different aspects of the Salesforce ecosystem, there's so many different pieces that are valuable, but I really have found a lot of joy in kind of digging into this area, specifically because it has that sort of big picture enterprise approach to things.
Yeah, I think those of us that are kind of nerds about that get excited about that piece of Data Cloud for sure. Rachel.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me on the office hours. I found out about Salesforce military, specifically as a military spouse, when, moving every 2 years and trying to find a job and that whole circle of just incompleteness in career. And so I found this thing called Salesforce Military. And at first I thought it was too good to be true. But I went through the program, got certified as an administrator, and then actually worked for the Salesforce military program at Salesforce for about 1.5 years, doing program development and rebrand from VetForce to Salesforce Military at the time. Then I spent about 2 years in consulting, so implementation work with a partner right at the height of COVID, and we moved, I think, 2 or 3 times. So it was like the first time in my career that I got to keep my job while moving across the country. And then my company actually got acquired. So at the time, I was like, you know what, if I'm going to onboard to another company, might as well be where I want to be long term and shoot for the stars and go for Salesforce, which is how I landed my current job as a solution engineer supporting state and local government. And I have the major privilege of working with brilliant gentlemen like Don and Bryan Wise to work through Data Cloud proof of technologies for some of our largest customers in the state of California.
That's amazing. I remember watching, Rachel, your demo that was recorded on helping the homeless population in the state of California. So really cool that you all get to have that impact on our customers. So for those of you that are joining for the first time, I always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. The next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up, help answer questions from your perspective. This will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers that are given. Please make sure to keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. The wonderful Daves will be helping moderate any questions that come through, and there's a lot of great information that gets shared in there, including learning, networking, and employment opportunities. If you have any questions during today's session, please feel free to go ahead and ask your question. If you are someone that doesn't feel comfortable speaking up, you can always post your question in the chat because we'll be monitoring for those as well. We'll also be looking for some raised hands. So finally, tonight's session is recorded. So if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let me know before speaking, and we will make sure that it is edited out of the final recording. All right, I know a lot of information to go over, but let's go ahead and jump in and start our questions. So Data Cloud is a really powerful tool within Salesforce that enables organizations to connect and unlock their data, providing a real comprehensive view of their customers. So let's explore how it works and the impact that it does have on businesses. So can you start by explaining what Salesforce Data Cloud is and how it fits into the broader Salesforce ecosystem? Whoever would like to take that on, go for it.
All right, so I'll kick us off here just to kind of get going, and then we'll let the smart people say something. One of the things that when I first heard about Data Cloud that it seems to me was that it was this additional capability, right? Is how I initially thought of it, and then I sort of turned my thinking around a little bit. But initially, it seems like, okay, we've got the Salesforce platform, right? We've got a metadata model, we've got a multi-tenant architecture, we've got all these different concepts. We can build apps on this platform. There's out-of-the-box capabilities with Service Cloud and Sales Cloud and all these other capabilities. And now we've got this extra cloud, right? So it seems on the surface like, well, we've got Service Cloud, we got Marketing Cloud, we got Commerce Cloud, we got Data Cloud, right? As I started to dig into it more, I started to look at Data Cloud as being a lot more foundational. And what I mean by that is every time that we're trying to approach a solution within Salesforce, ultimately what the goal is to pull together information from a variety of sources. And maybe it's, hey, I've got this file on my computer. Maybe it's I'm data entering something. Maybe some external user like a recruit or a family member, whatever, is putting something into a website. Maybe there's an integration to an external system. But regardless, you're pulling data together from lots of different places. And you're trying to surface it in a way that makes sense comprehensively. Historically, doing that comprehensively part is hard. And what Data Cloud does is makes that a lot easier. And interestingly, it does it in a way that on the surface can add some additional complexity kind of at the setup so that you can then do a lot of cool things with it. But ultimately, the way that I look at it is this. With Data Cloud, you're able to pull together information from multiple sources, align it so that it's all similarly, I'll say sort of cataloged, right? We're unifying all of this data into a common canonical data model, right? A common reference source for how to think about all these concepts. And then we're using that as the foundation for all the things that you want to be able to do with that data, which is actually where it gets important. Because why go through all the extra effort of doing all this work of unifying your data streams if you're not going to do something useful with it? And that's where the real power comes.
Maybe I'll just give a quick example, Don, to kind of ground it. I was working on a child welfare demo, so like foster child placement. And as we talked with the caseworker and we showed her some of the demo that we built out, she said, that's all well and great. But one of the tools that we use all the time to see if something's going wrong in the home, right? We've placed this child in the home, something's going wrong, is actually their grades. And so we reach out to all of the school districts in the area, and we try and get data from them. And often it's like a CSV dump of here are their grades, how many absences, how many tardies, things like that. And so we took that and said, okay, if we're working inside of Sales Cloud or inside of Salesforce, and we've got a child welfare setup where my caseworker's in looking at a student, looking at that child that they've placed, how could I bring in all of that grade data? And I don't necessarily want that all in Salesforce. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm not doing transactions on it, but I need to have alerts that something's gone wrong. I need to be able to have access to that. So we actually map that data coming in from an Amazon S3 bucket where these data dumps were getting dropped off. We did identity resolution so that the child that's in the child welfare system matches the student coming from the student information system and link those together for us automatically. And then we're able to see the report card data just right inside of Salesforce. And this isn't a glitzy screen at all, but I'll just give you a quick little view of what this looks like. I've got Sam Rousey here, person account. This represents the child that's placed in a home. And if I go to the student report card tab, this data doesn't actually live in Salesforce anymore. This data is sitting inside a Data Cloud, brought in through a CSV import into Data Cloud, linked up through identity resolution. And I can run flows off of that. If I wanted to trigger some type of automation to say, hey, you need to schedule an appointment, go meet with this child, something's going wrong, I could do that there. Looked like maybe we had a question pop up there.
Let's see. I don't see one. Did someone have their hand raised that I maybe missed?
Maybe it was an emoji that flew by.
It was probably an emoji. Yeah, so this is great. And it gets into the customer 360, right? A 360 view of the customer. So for those that have kind of been in the ecosystem, it's a very familiar term of having this 360 view. But for those that have not, what is a customer 360 view and why is it important? And how does Data Cloud help us achieve that for our customers?
Yeah, Geraldine, you brought up the housing and homeless transformation kind of proof of concept that my team helped build, and it specifically was catered to veterans on purpose to cater, the storyline of how do we understand the full picture of these individuals who are going through something like experiencing homelessness. And in the realm of this storyline, right, you have an individual who's experiencing homelessness. How do we understand what bus vouchers they've been assigned to? How do we understand what homeless shelters we've been assigned to, or what grant programs they've applied for? When you think about it in the government standpoint, all of these are different systems with different teams ran by different, completely separate, siloed systems. So the data cloud does a good is the foundation. I like that, Dawn, is extremely foundational for connecting those sources, not necessarily editing on other systems, but just having a visual into these systems to be able to have that data and connect it to that full 360. So now you can say, hey, Alex, who's our veteran, he's had 3 bus vouchers, he's gone through substance abuse program, and he really prefers this shelter. and we can get better service moving forward in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So the end goal is to provide the best possible service to a customer, whoever that might be, right? And that 360 view really helps with that. So, Data Cloud is a fairly new in what, a lot would consider a complex cloud. And so why is it important, would you say, for someone who's new to Salesforce to push beyond just some of the basics, right? And really look towards some of these more advanced learnings and advanced products like Data Cloud and AI? Why is this so foundational, as you say, Dawn, to kind of the future for the Salesforce platform?
One aspect that I think there is just the way that AI is changing the way people interact with systems and what we're doing here at Salesforce with AI. And so if you caught any of Dreamforce or any of the recordings of Dreamforce, all of the discussion was around Agentforce and kind of agentic AI, if you will. And Data Cloud is helping to power a lot of that. So just really specifically, whenever I talk with government agencies about AI, they're always a little bit leery at first. They're a little bit like, I'm not sure government's ready for AI. But we start talking about how we can leverage their existing policy and their existing data to make AI relevant to their business processes without having to fine tune a large language model, without having to get crazy complex. And we do that in a couple of different ways with Data Cloud. And this kind of illustrates how it's worming its way into our platform everywhere, right? One is grounding in structured data. So being able to take that C360 view, grab that and put that into an AI prompt. The next one is using unstructured data. That's my personal favorite new feature inside of Data Cloud, is it can analyze your unstructured data, whether that's case notes, chatter, email, or things like policy documents sitting in PDF. You can load that into Data Cloud and start using that. Customers are very excited about using that unstructured data. And then the third piece, just how data and AI sit together, is Data Cloud is actually part of our Einstein trust layer, and where it's capturing all of the audit and feedback of everything that's happening in AI. So just to kind of summarize there, AI is changing the way people are thinking about technology. It's more than just a hype cycle going on right now, a lot of changes going on. And Data Cloud is sitting at the heart of a lot of what Salesforce is doing with AI. And so that's one of the reasons I would jump into it and start figuring it out and learning that.
I had the interesting opportunity last week to go to a Gen AI showcase put on by the state of California. And you get 20-minute, actually 15, they cut you off at like 15 minutes. And just increments of your pitching AI and technology for the future of the state government. And so we had other consumers like Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Salesforce, of course, we were there, and I represented our Data Cloud session. And how do you explain all of this in 15 minutes? Well, this came to me at like 1 a.m, and as a mother of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old little boys, I said, Data Cloud's kind of like the 3 little pigs. And so bear with me. We all know the story, right? We all know the story. The wolf goes to the first house. He blows down the house of straw. He goes to the second house. He blows down the house of twigs. When he gets to the brick house, he can't get in. If you don't have a data strategy, your straw house is going to fall. If you don't have a data platform, your twig house is going to crumble. But the foundation, exactly to Dawn's point, of those brick foundation of Data Cloud is the foundation of everything AI. Like, AI is flashy and exciting, right? But until you have that foundational layer, then it's not going to work properly and reap the best benefits possible.
I love that analogy. So as somebody who has kids as well, like all those types of examples, I think that one thing, you started with this idea of this being more complex, and the truth is that a Salesforce implementation without Data Cloud versus a Salesforce implementation with Data Cloud, the one without is simpler. It just is, right? And so the question then becomes, well, why would you introduce that additional complexity, not only from a technology perspective within the org, but also why would you invest the time to learn that thing in the first place. And I think it depends on the use case, right? So if you are somebody who is working on a very straightforward and simple use case without a lot of these, without some of the opportunity to realize the benefit, then it's fine. It's kind of like if you're trying to travel to your neighborhood grocery store, right? And your grocery store is literally at the end of the block. You probably aren't going to bother learning how to ride a bike, right? Because you can just walk there. And all that time it takes to learn how to ride the bike isn't worth the cost savings of just walking down to the end of the block. But if your grocery store is 5 miles away, all of a sudden that initial investment in learning how to ride a bike is really beneficial because now you're able to get the value over that longer run. With Data Cloud, what we're essentially doing is we're taking some additional time up front in order to pull these streams together in a way where we're able to reference these various data sources to do something that's otherwise would be a lot harder to do without that. And Bryan made a great point earlier about the connection with AI. There's lots of activations, in terms of how you actually get that value from Data Cloud. But AI is probably the one that excites me the most. And I had this aha moment last month, shortly before Dreamforce, when I was playing around with some of this stuff, and saw how quickly you can get, without code, how quickly you can get from just configuring your Salesforce org to having an interaction with one of these smart agents, these autonomous agents, and being able to ask them detailed questions around data that otherwise would be embedded in policy documents, whatever, and being able to surface those answers without taking the time to train a model, these types of things. This is something that historically there's been a pretty high barrier to entry to get to that point. All of a sudden, the time that we invest in the complexity such that it is, right, of setting up your data properly in the beginning is now worth it because you're able to achieve these kinds of outcomes. And thinking sort of more broadly about the ecosystem, companies, there's a data explosion. There's an absolute data explosion, not just within DoD, but just enterprise-wide, across the world. And part of the problem that organizations, companies, and governmental organizations are finding is that their data is kind of locked up in these various silos. Without some sort of comprehensive approach to pulling that together, it will continue to remain in these silos, and you won't be able to get the value of that. Even if you've got valuable data, if it's sitting over there somewhere else where you don't have access to it, you're not going to see the value of this. And so you need something that can pull this together, and that's really where Data Cloud shines.
Amazing. If I was not convinced before, I'm convinced now, right? The importance of Data Cloud. Yeah, I mean, everyone has heard a lot about it. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the path and recommendations that you all might have for those that are interested in learning more about Data Cloud. I know there's a lot of new, exciting Trailhead modules that are out there, but how did you all kind of jump into learning Data Cloud, and what recommendations would you have for people as they're starting to jump into Data Cloud and learning more?
So one thing just to be aware of is that Data Cloud is a little bit harder to get access to a Data Cloud environment than your normal like Salesforce developer org. So the first thing I would do, I learn by doing, right? I've got to play with it. I've got to try it. That's how I learn. Go out and find the Trailhead modules that are hands-on challenges for Data Cloud. There's, I think, 5 or 6 of them now that are hands-on challenges. And in there, you get a special Data Cloud enabled developer org. And so you can actually play with Data Cloud, give it a try. It is locked down a little bit. They don't have all of the admin tools up and running, but you can load data in, you can set up identity resolution rule sets to build that unified profile. You can actually do a decent amount of stuff there. So that would be my first step, is get that hands-on challenge environment from Trailhead, and because then you can get your org and you can start playing with it a little bit. One of the other things that I would recommend is going out and learning a little bit about the data landscape that's out there. There's a wonderful article on the Andreessen Horowitz blog on what they call the modern analytic architecture. And if you look through that and see what people are trying to build, if they say, I want to build the ultimate analytic architecture, you'll see all these patterns start to emerge. That's how Data Cloud was built. And so what Salesforce is offering is that as a service versus a go build your own modern analytic environment. So learning a little bit hands-on Data Cloud, but also just learning the modern data landscape and some of the vocabulary around that. The introduction of cloud data warehouses has totally changed the analytic world in the last 5 years. And it's really neat to see what's happening in that space.
I completely agree with that. The thing I would maybe just gotta throw in on the front end is that if your brand's new to Salesforce, don't feel the need to dive straight into Data Cloud. If you're still just trying to get your feet wet, there's so much out there, and Trailhead's amazing, huge Trailhead fan. But feel free to kind of just play around with sort of the core capabilities of the platform, right? So setting up custom objects, creating your own Lightning web apps, doing things with process automation with Flow. Doing that type of stuff will get you comfortable with the foundational pieces, especially when it comes to playing around with the data model, right? Sort of understanding sort of the thought process. If you've got a background in computer science, or even if you don't, honestly, if you've just worked with applications, I'll simplify it even further. If you just work with spreadsheets, everybody who's worked with a spreadsheet can understand this concept of, hey, I've got rows of data, I've got columns of data, and if I wanted to have a whole table full of people, I'd have each person on their own row. I'd have, a bunch of columns for things like address and phone number, that sort of thing. We've all seen this 1,000 times, right? It's a really easy translation of that concept to the concept of an object, right? And sort of drawing those parallels. But understanding that piece as a foundation will then be really useful, because then when you start to think about it from a Data Cloud perspective, now when you go through those Trailhead modules, and we're talking about creating sort of specialty objects, essentially, because a lot of the core pieces, it's all the same metadata model. It's all the same concepts. But when we talk about, you'll see a lot of acronyms, DLOs and DMOs, right? Data lake objects and data model objects. But fundamentally, what are those at the end of the day? They're just specialty custom objects that have been infused with a lot of the smarts that Salesforce has invested them with in order to bring Data Cloud to life. And so getting those foundations in place, don't be afraid to do that first before kind of diving in. But then, yeah, absolutely, the trails and so forth are amazing.
Yeah, so talking about kind of getting the foundational knowledge first, so help us kind of understand, why is it important to understand the data model and security, especially before you start kind of jumping into Data Cloud? I mean, it's important for all the clouds, right? But is there anything that kind of stands out specifically with Data Cloud, or why this would be important for newcomers to really focus on?
The security part is a big part of this foundationally as well, right? So being Data Cloud, that you're bringing in all of these systems of record into Salesforce, that means that it's backed by what we call the Einstein trust layer, which means it's not going to leave Salesforce, right? So you can pull in large language models, and Salesforce has an agreement with these technologies that says, hey, let's handshake. We can use your technology, bringing it on the Salesforce platform, but your data, this data that we're training our internal data on and using AI on with the power of Data Cloud, is never going to leave the Salesforce boundary. So that's extremely important to iterate to customers, and making sure that they understand that their data is not training the World Wide Web of these large language models or AI or anything outside of Salesforce.
I think one other thing to consider there is kind of where Data Cloud grew up. So Data Cloud grew up in Salesforce as It's had a few different names over the years, probably our most changed named product out there, but it was called the Customer Data Platform for a while, or a CDP. And that's actually kind of an industry space. And one of the use cases for Data Cloud, right? We talked about bringing all this data together and all the value, but you want to do something with that data. And so activating it out for communication purposes is one of the main use cases for Data Cloud, right? Using this data, collecting a good profile, deciding who I need to communicate with, and then starting that communication process. Well, in order to do that, going back to your question, Geraldine, is I need to understand my data model for a unified profile, how that unified profile maps back to all of the data models coming from my source system. I also need, if I'm doing messaging, I need to understand the privacy and consent data model that's part of Data Cloud to make sure that I'm appropriately sending messages out and I'm not violating like the CAN-SPAM Act or GDPR principles or things like that. So all of that's kind of built into Data Cloud. We talked about those as a service features there, starting to understand the data models that we ship with Data Cloud. That's out on the architect.salesforce.com website. You can go grab those data models, open those up, figure out what we mean by the party data model, the consent data model, the service data model, the sales data model. These are special models that we've put inside a Data Cloud. Very important to understand those and figure out how your data might map into them, where you might need to customize it, because the same tenets that Dawn was talking about, ideas of basic Salesforce platform ideas, right? Custom objects, standard objects, custom fields, standard fields. We have the exact same thing in Data Cloud, and you're going to do that. So understanding what's there and what's out of the box with the standard, and then where you might need to customize that.
Yeah, awesome. I know it definitely, when CDP first came out, it was seen as almost like a complement to Marketing Cloud, right? Like it was mostly Marketing Cloud users. It seems like it's very much expanded from that now, and Marketing Cloud is just kind of one small piece that it can help unify now. So Dawn, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of throw out there just to kind of tack on to that concept is one other thing to think about is what types of users you have, because you can think of setting up your Data Cloud as sort of something of a pipeline where you start by thinking about what are my data sources that I want to rely upon and bringing those in, right? How do I map those to this standard reference model? And then from there, how do I do things with that, right? So how do I, calculate insights around that? How do I segment this up? And then how do I then, turn it into something productive and useful? And so there's kind of a natural, beginning through the end, but you may have different users, different administrators, right? Different data analysts working different pieces of that pipeline. And that's normal and that's okay, right? For smaller implementations, maybe it's just the Salesforce administrator that's doing all of that. But very frequently, you might have different folks. So as you're thinking through from a security model perspective, also be thinking through, about the different types of users and different types of permissions that you might be assigning along the way.
Yeah. So we are about at, a little bit over halfway point. So we will go ahead and grab our group photo here in just a minute. And then we'll dig into like why should people, what's the demand for people with Data Cloud certifications and everything. But before I forget, we'll go ahead and get our group photo so we can share that on social media later. It's important. We always want to be branding, and we will make sure to post this on LinkedIn and Twitter tomorrow, and we'll tag everyone in the photo. So if you only have your first name that is listed and you would like to be tagged in the photo, please feel free to drop your full name in the chat window so that we can make sure that we get you tagged for the photo. So I'll give everyone a minute to do that if they would like to. And if you would like to participate in the photo, go ahead and turn on your camera. At this point in time, I think Dave Albright is going to help me out because I'm working on a tiny laptop screen and take the photo for me. So Dave, I will let you do the countdown so that I don't mess you up.
It'll probably screw it up anyway. And then my mouth will be open and I'll look like a moron. All right. 3, 2, 1.
All right.
Got
and
it.
I'm sure Dave Nava, because he is always uber prepared, probably took one as well. I'm just going to throw that out there. All right. So let's jump into kind of the why, right? Like, what is the demand right now for people that are trained or knowledgeable in Data Cloud? What is kind of the job market look like? Why would it make sense for someone who's wanting to advance their career or find a job to really dig into Data Cloud?
One of the things I love about Data Cloud, and this is just kind of my learning style, is it requires you to know a little bit about all of the platform. So if you have some Data Cloud expertise and something that you could articulate in an interview is, hey, I learned Data Cloud, and that required me to understand how Data Cloud fits with the Salesforce core platform, how Data Cloud worked with Marketing Cloud, how Data Cloud and MuleSoft complement each other. And it gets you a little bit exposure to a whole bunch of different products. And it allows you to talk to different use cases. Oh, you're interested in marketing use cases? Yes, I've got experience with that in Data Cloud. You're interested in analytics use cases? I've done that with Tableau and Data Cloud. You're interested in C360 on the core platform? Yes, I've done that, and I brought that in there. So Data Cloud is just kind of that secret glue holding together our whole C360 platform. And I think that's one of the reasons I want to put it on my resume and get that out there.
As far as demand goes, we have these internal programs as solution engineers called black belt programs. So the idea is that everyone's a solution engineer. And then when you need specialty help, you can go to these channels and request help. So as Bryan leads the program, Dawn and I are black belt, Data Cloud black belts. And so we can accept these requests globally coming in. So this specific channel sees, Bryan, you probably know the metrics, but at least 3 to 4 times the amount of other black belt programs and growing. So we're always tracking those metrics internally of the demand, and Data Cloud is a very high demand.
I think the other thing that's very true. I think the other thing to maybe kind of take into account is this really lays the foundation for a lot of the innovations that are continuing to come out. So we've hit on AI as an example of this type of thing, where to the point that Bryan made earlier, I mean, this really grew out of use cases that were more perhaps more aligned with things that are traditional marketing type use cases. But if you look at it a little bit more comprehensively, once you have those foundations in place, you can go, oh, I didn't even think about that, but I could build this. It's kind of like if you buy a big box of Legos so that you can build the truck that's on the front cover, and you're like, dude, this is really cool. I love building the truck. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, I can use these Legos for all kinds of things, right? And it's not a matter of saying, well, I have a hammer, so everything's a nail, but it's more a matter of saying, I've got an extraordinarily versatile tool or tool set that will make other things better, right? So it really enhances the value of that. So as we're thinking of it through the lens of, this being a marketable skill, it doesn't really matter whether you're, presently supporting or intending to support an organization that's sort of a traditional service cloud type shop, or commerce or marketing or sales or whatever the case is, or even just completely custom apps. In all of those cases, there will be a need for some of the technologies that Data Cloud brings to bear, whether that's something as simple as I need a comprehensive set of data analytics that tells a story that maps from all of these different pieces of siloed data, or whether it's some of these other things that we've talked about around marketing segmentation or AI.
Amazing. So I've heard a lot about, there's a lot of pieces that go into this, kind of touches a lot of different clouds, right? So, and I know that there's a lot of discovery that goes into the mapping portion, specifically in Data Cloud. So can you talk about, in your experience, why is it important to have relationship building and communication skills, some of those more soft skills, when it comes to working with customers and clients, building out a Data Cloud solution?
I can take that one. I think it's important because while Data Cloud is super technical. Not your customers aren't going to know how to hook it up, and right. So they want to take their business problems and turn it to business actions. Doesn't really matter what tools you use. That's kind of our job to figure out of how are we going to do this the most efficient, most successful way to set them up. But they're looking at solve this problem, XYZ to get us here, right? So just understanding how to translate the tech into business language and then have them understand, not be overwhelmed by all of the, features and technology powering behind it, and having that translatable reference.
Mapping this in with your last question a little bit, on why you might want this as a skill, and then kind of the soft skill side of this. One of the things that Salesforce did with Data Cloud, announced it about a year ago, is allowing every enterprise edition and higher customer to turn on Data Cloud themselves, and get a certain amount for free. We call it our starter edition or a freemium edition. And you can run a fairly successful project with just the free amount there. But as a Salesforce employee, I've always been kind of scared that somebody's going to turn that on, not know what to do with that, and then be disappointed and turn it off and never go back to it. And I think if you know what Data Cloud is, you can help put together what would a successful proof of concept or pilot look like that I could try with these free licenses and say, we're going to do this and meet these business requirements. And if that's successful, then we would go back and say, okay, yes, we might need to procure more licenses. So you can help people use that free version better. I think that would be a good skill to have, but then also kind of talk directly to what you were asking about here, Jolyn, of, what business kind of soft skills. It's coming up with the use case. You don't want to consolidate data for the sake of consolidating data. What are you going to actually do with it? How do I want to activate that data? That's the most important step in a Data Cloud project and implementation.
So what types of roles do you all see that are out there right now that might need these Data Cloud skills? I mean, you all are at Salesforce, right? So that's, one is working at Salesforce potentially, but what other roles out in the ecosystem do you potentially see needing these skills or having their career potentially advanced by having these types of skills?
I think there's an opportunity to look at it through a bunch of different lenses, honestly. And, my knee-jerk reaction is that this is something where anybody who is serving as a Salesforce admin, right, for their respective orgs, at least having an understanding of the value that Data Cloud brings to bear and starting to understand some of the core concepts will allow you to listen out for what types of use cases when your organization's leadership comes to you and says, hey, I wish that my applications could do X, Y, and Z, right? Somewhere along the way in those conversations, you're going to hear, oh, this would be made dramatically simpler if I leverage Data Cloud. So knowing enough about it to be able to then identify it as a potential solution when the time comes, I think is really valuable. And that's sort of a generic from the perspective of an admin. The other side of the coin is that if you're in a business analyst or a data analyst role, different approaches to things, but being able to understand the value of Data Cloud will allow you to align solutions to problems. And that's ultimately what this is all about, right? It's not the solution for those solutions' sake. It's being able to align it to the business problems that need solving.
Awesome. Kelly, you have a question?
It's not really a question. It's kind of a statement, but I work in that intersectionality between life sciences and Salesforce, and where Data Cloud has a huge, huge amount of potential is there's so many disparate pieces, especially around clinical trials, patient care, payer care, and being able to sit this platform down in between those disparate systems so that people can go, oh, here is a potential client or patient that might be useful to get this clinical trial information if they choose to. There are just so many great use cases driven by data that's in different silos when it comes to healthcare and well-being. And so I feel like sitting in that pretty niche spot between in technology and data. I think this is going to be explosive. So I'm trying to help anybody on the healthcare side that wants to get more technical. I'm like, oh, so much potential for you. Oh, so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, great addition and perspective, because we are definitely seeing that it's across all industries. There's a use case for it. So love to hear that direct example of how it's going to be able to help and how it is helping healthcare. Rachel, you came off mute.
No, I was just going to reiterate, I cover a couple healthcare accounts, and exactly to your point, Kelly, it's a game changer. And so outside of healthcare, we had a customer that had 15 different systems just for licensing. So this is just a local municipality, 15 systems just for one license. And think about all the other systems that make up a whole city or county. So just the ability to connect all of that, even just for one licensing application from start to finish, right? Breaking it down to even a smaller use case, and then from there growing to the bigger picture. It's pretty amazing.
If anybody has any examples of how Data Cloud could potentially help with gathering climate change data. I'm one of these people in North Carolina. Good old Hurricane Helene came through. But one of the things I was thinking about, especially with things happening so fast from an environmental level, is what are some use cases and ways that we can use Data Cloud that will specifically help us correlate data better, faster, and drive change. So if any of you have any use cases around that, I'd be super interested in hearing about it. So
I actually cover an account, California Emergency Services, and they use Slack, interestingly enough, to have real time, coordinating efforts like emergency services, obviously, right? Whether that's wildfires in California or, all of these different things. So that could be a potential connection for you to look into on how they're using that.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel.
I think one of the things that comes to mind there, Kelly, to me is just a quick example. I was working with a tolling agency, and 2 years ago, they came to Salesforce and say, hey, we want to design a new modern tolling agency. How will Salesforce fit into that? And we looked at it, we kind of architected a solution. But one of the things that we did is we said, the toll events themselves, like where you've got large amounts of raw data coming in really fast, the Salesforce platform isn't designed to handle that. So this was a few years ago. Fast forward now, Data Cloud is a platform that's designed to handle high volume, high velocity data, problems like that. And when I start thinking about kind of climate change and monitoring things like that, looking at bringing in direct device data and able to look at that at scale, just Data Cloud opens up some new possibilities, whereas before we would have maybe said, I'm not sure the Salesforce platform is the right place for this type of data. I think you have to rethink that with Data Cloud. Well, is this a good place? And if I was streaming in that type of data or bringing in that direct device type of data, what type of analytics would I want to run on that? But what type of like real-time action would I want to have happen there, where I've got a data-driven threshold that is then kicking off some sort of flow or automation or webhook out to Slack or something, where Data Cloud's helping collect the data and then identify kind of the important data events and letting people know about those important data events.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Great question, Kelly. So before we get in, because we have about 10 minutes left, our final question, I'd love to ask you all just to tell us a little bit more, because a lot of our community is related to the military in some way, shape, or form, right? How did you all kind of make that transition from the military, or from Rachel, your perspective as a military spouse, how did you kind of make that transition into the Salesforce ecosystem? What advice do you have for our listeners that maybe are transitioning from a new career, or maybe have had a large break in their employment history, to really be able to jump in and be successful in the Salesforce ecosystem?
So I'll start. One, I love programs like Trailhead Military, and how that kind of helps in getting those skills there. When I was transitioning out, I used a headhunter that specialized in placing junior military officers. And what was interesting about that is they spent a lot of time working with us, making sure we knew how to equate something that we would do in the military to that business technology. So the fact that I qualified to stand command duty officer, what does that mean to somebody out in the real world, right? And what does that mean from a leadership perspective, from a business perspective? And I really found a lot of value in that. I would have never considered technical sales as a possible career route. Now I've spent 20 plus years doing that. And that was part of, this junior military officer program, teaching us about these different types of roles and how those fit. So that was my personal transition story there.
Awesome. Dawn, I think maybe I saw you come off mute, or Rachel, whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, it's interesting when I left the Navy, it's really stressful in those last few months right before you're leaving. You want to have something lined up, and people don't want to talk to you, 9 months out, shockingly. So I eventually got a role as an engineer, not within the Salesforce ecosystem, and was doing implementations to support FedCiv organizations. And I liked what I did, but I was getting consistently frustrated with the amount of time it would take. Essentially, what I was doing was I was serving as a kind of a hybrid between a business architect and a business analyst, and I was trying to connect the technical implementation to the business requirements that the customers stated that they needed. And I was always getting frustrated because it seemed like this should be something super easy. And then I turn around and talk to the technical folks, and they're like, "Oh, that's tough." And I was like, "Oh, it shouldn't be tough, right?" So I was doing that for a bunch of years, and I kind of stumbled across the Salesforce ecosystem doing implementations for one particular project there. I was like, "Man, this is amazing," right? And so I became a big advocate for it. Yes, I'm in a pre-sales role now, and I almost didn't apply for this job because it said sales engineer in the position description, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do sales, right? But it's kind of like if you go to a really good movie and you're like, oh gosh, you got to see this movie, it's amazing, right? If you're really passionate about something, you really love something, you're going to tell other people about it, and that enthusiasm will shine through. And to me, being within the sales organization, but part of Salesforce, I just get to tell people about all the cool things that I get to do. I mean, no kidding. Like my kids have their own developer edition orgs for Salesforce that they do their own stuff in. Like I'm that passionate about it. Like I really want people to get to see how cool. Yeah, they don't do data cloud stuff. They don't need that. That's okay, right? But being able to say, look how quickly we can get from I don't know how to do anything to wow, I can do really cool stuff is remarkable. And so I think sharing that kind of passion finds the area. Hopefully it's within Salesforce. I think it would be within Salesforce, but find the area for you that you're passionate about, and then tap into that and just keep digging, and then leverage that enthusiasm as you're looking for specific job areas.
I love that. They're a great audience to practice some of your demos on too, right? Because if they can get it, just knowing enough to be dangerous, you're like, I've got this one in the bag. Rachel, you are up.
No, I feel like Dawn and I are on the same wavelength here, because, not only when I say Salesforce military changed my life, I don't say that lightly, because not only has it, as a military spouse, supported me in career for the past 11 years, but it actually very much influenced my husband's decision to transition out this past summer. So he actually got out of active duty in end of July. and now works at Salesforce on the cybersecurity compliance product team, which is like his dream job. But he actually did SkillBridge program at Salesforce, actually Slack, in customer success. So he kind of took it as a learning, just getting out into the ecosystem, and he knew he wanted to do something in cybersecurity too. So to Don's point, get out there, see what's out there. There's so much that you can do. You don't even have to work at Salesforce, right? You can be in the broader ecosystem of implementation work and partners and app exchange partners. So just understanding what you're passionate about, I think, is going to be, and sticking with that path is going to be the best foot forward.
Awesome. So we have come to our final question. This has been amazing. Hope you all are ready. So if you were to give our audience your final parting words, final advice, whether that be, man, I wish I would have known this when I transitioned, or I came into the Salesforce ecosystem, or I took this new role, what would you like to impart on our audience?
The thing I would mention is find a way to share your brand really, really early. And I did that specifically by trying to answer questions for people. So way back in the day, that was, answering on email news groups, speaking up and answering questions. Is it blogging on LinkedIn? Is it answering questions on Slack, or getting involved in a Trailblazer community, in the local community groups, standing up, presenting there, and just that building your brand through answering questions. It's amazing what that's done for my network, my career over the years. And that's my one piece of advice out there.
I think to my last point is just to say yes and explore all the opportunity out there. There's so much, and with all of the new innovation, it's not slowing down. So just saying yes to opportunity, and then kind of from there, I always see it as kind of like a fork in the road. There's so many different directions until you kind of pick one path, and you're, again, passionate about that, then you can move forward to more aligning with that strategy. But if you're just starting out, just see what's out there.
All right, Don, bring us home.
Yeah.
Last but not least.
as you're looking for a new job, I think one of the things I really loved about the Navy was that sense of mission and that sense of purpose. I think it's really important to feel passionate about the work you do, because you're going to spend a lot of time of your day doing it, right? So find a role where you're able to genuinely be of service to others, and find a role where you can really give back, whether that's internal within the company, whether that's the way that you engage with your customers or other stakeholders. Make sure that you're finding a role where you're able to really add value and contribute to the betterment of the people that you're working with, and you'll find a lot of job satisfaction there.
And it's pretty cool to be able to work with cool people like Bryan and Rachel, right? That never hurts to have some pretty cool coworkers, for sure. Thank you all so much. Before we close, I would love to say thank you one more time to Bryan, Dawn, Rachel. Thank you so much for co-hosting tonight's session with me. It has been awesome having you all here, getting your perspectives on Data Cloud, why it's important for us to really take a good look at Data Cloud and skill up in these areas. It's definitely a topic that is top of mind for a lot of people right now. So really appreciate your expertise in taking time out of your day to meet with us all and give back to our wonderful military Trailblazer office hours community. So with that, thank you all so much for attending, and I hope to see you next session. Have a great rest of your Wednesday evening.